Hi, everyone. I am out in my permaculture garden today because I have an extraordinarily special guest. With me today is Greg Peterson, the founder of the Urban Farm and a friend of mine for at least 20 years. I don't want to count back any further than that.
Right.
And he's come to us today to talk about, yes, the urban farm, but also the evolution of a business, of an education, and of a boy into a farmer. Hey, Greg, it's good to see you.
All right, back at you. Thanks for having me. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Um, Whenever we talk, it is usually about gardens and things like that. So before we sort of launch into it, the sounds you'll hear, everyone, are probably my chickens who are roaming around here. I don't have a goat yet. I want to talk about that.
Right.
And I'm in an urban neighborhood. I'm in downtown Tempe, much like you're sort of in downtown Phoenix. And how did you get there? Where did you start? I've heard you say that your father was an investment banker and that he really wanted you to follow in those footsteps.
Oh, yes.
What went south? What
Well,
went
there you
down?
go. There you go. My dad, actually, he was a financial planner, not an investment
Financial.
banker, but a financial planner. And he was a long-time executive at Sears through the early 80s, and then started his financial planning business. And he had these great visions that I would take over the financial planning business. And all I have to say about that is thank God for my brother. He took it over. He's rocking with it. It's an amazing business for him. But what I always told him is I said, Dad, see these hands? These are farmer hands. See the calluses? These are for making food. Because
Yeah.
I knew from a very early age that there was something wrong with the way we were living on the planet and how we were eating on the planet. I wrote a paper in the 8th grade, it was 1974, on how we were overfishing the oceans. So I knew back then
Yeah.
that there was something to be done.
Yeah.
And along the way, I had my first business. I used to deliver newspapers when I was 12. And then,
Classic.
right, exactly. And that was in the early 70s, so that we could still do that back then. And then I used to hang out at a local fish store here in town. And, when I was 14, 15 years old, and one of the guys that worked at the fish store was a friend. His name was Bill. And he used to clean fish ponds for people. And he said to me one day, he said, Greg, I'm going to clean somebody's fish pond on Sunday. You want to come with me? It's like, muck out a fish pond? I'm in. Let's do it. And so I showed up. We did what we did and cleaned out the fish pond. And when we were done at the end of the day, he says, Greg, I don't want to do this anymore. I have about a half a dozen clients. I just want to give them to you. Are you game? It's like, sure. And that really fed into my desire to figure out how to grow fish for people to eat. I was very interested in aquaculture in the 70s. And so one of the things that I did was I helped people convert their swimming pools into aquaculture ponds so they could actually raise food for fish for food.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of started it all.
Wow. But you went into computers.
I did. So
You went into tech.
I did. In 1979, this was still before tech for me. In 1979, I went to work at a gift wrap center in the malls. We used to take Christmas gifts, put them in tin cans, seal them up so people had to, use a can opener to open them up.
Mm-hmm.
And within 2 years, I actually owned the business. I was 20, 21 years old, and I did that. I did both the fish pond business and the can of gift factories or the gift wrap business until 1984, when I let my parents talk me into getting a real job. And so I shut both those down and went out and I found a job. I was absolutely miserable working full-time for somebody else. In my life, I've only had one full-time job. It was in 1984. It lasted 11 months. I got fired on December 1st. I was miserable.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah. And so I was sitting there, all right, what do I do next? And I was actually rooming with a friend of mine who was the Apple rep. And he had a Macintosh computer sitting on his desk. And I was delivering pizzas at night. And and so I was home during the day, and he was at work during the day. So I played on his Macintosh computer. And by the time 1984 was over, I had started my first tech business. It was called Graphics Ink and Type. I used to do laser typesetting for people's newsletters. I bought one of the first laser typesetters or laser printers here in Phoenix, and I was laying out in a very old version of PageMaker. I was laying out newsletters for people and getting paid for it. And fast forward about 2 years, I started a tech company where we were teaching people how to use their computers and doing custom programming for people. And then fast forward till 1987, that was a year later, I started a software company, and we were doing what now would be called a plug-in. And I did the technology for the middle part of my life, from the time, let's see, call it 1984 to 2004. I was in technology, and I had multiple different tech businesses. I owned the Apple Authorized Training Center here in Phoenix for 4 or 5 years, and then the software company that I started in 1987, I sold in 2004. In the meantime, I went back to school to Arizona State University and got my bachelor's degree.
Are you still gardening all this time? Are you still growing
Oh yeah,
your yard and doing all that
yeah,
in addition to this? You're a sort of a
you bet.
sequential compound entrepreneur.
Yes, yeah. Well,
Compound.
I I do best working for myself. I do best. It's just where I'm most comfortable. And yeah, so over the years, in 1989 I bought my house. It's on flood irrigation, just like you're on flood irrigation,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
basically means I get 6 inches of water 22 times a year in my yard. It's a water right that comes with the property. When I went looking for a house in 1989, the number one thing on the list was flood water. It's like, I want to make sure that I have enough water to grow everything I want to grow. So I
Yeah.
started gardening in 1989. I actually started gardening in 1974 at the Weldon house. We moved into the Weldon house when I was 15. And Mom says, Greg, see the right back side of the backyard? That's your garden. Go start digging. And so I've
So
always
your mom understood you.
my mom understood me.
Yeah.
Although she really bought into, sorry, Mom, if you're listening, she really bought into that I needed to get a real job. Yeah, real jobs never made me happy. In fact, I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day. He said, Greg, if you stop doing what you're doing now, what would you do? And I said, I don't know. I'm unemployable. Couldn't get a job. Nobody wants me. So.
But you never have a problem getting a job. Whether you keep them or not is it's very
Right.
dependent on your mood.
Well,
But you never had trouble. I
that's
see you
true.
popping up everywhere.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those jobs are, me doing businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Although I did do a part-time gig at Arizona State University from 2011 to 2015.
I remember.
Teaching a couple of classes there. Loved that. I so loved connecting with the students. In fact, my 2 main implementers on my team were students of mine at Arizona State University.
Mm-hmm.
I saw their potential. Actually, with one of them, I saw their potential. That's Taylor. With the other one, she just kept working on me until I gave her a job. And
is that
and
Janice?
Yeah, that's Janice. That's Janice. Exactly.
I can see her doing that.
Amazing people.
I wanted to ask you too, because I remember we talked about it at the time. You participated in the same professional program I did later, AIM, the APS Academy for the Advancement Minority and Women-Owned Businesses.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Oh, yes.
I remember you coming into
and
the class, and
yeah.
you encouraged me to apply, and I did.
Yeah.
And you went through several changes after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, for that was 2007 and 2008 that I did the AIM program.
Yeah.
It's a 2-year executive training program.
Yeah.
And that was for my online business called Your Guide to Green. We were filming a TV show pilot, which never went anywhere, and doing an online educational portal on how to be green and then selling green products.
I remember.
And then the economy tanked and my business tanked and I had to shift again.
But it's still, your emphasis has always been on green, on sustainability, how to
Yes,
live on the land appropriately, letting it feed you and nurturing the soil. And that whole cycle never changed with you. I
right.
remember
Going.
going over to the urban farm years ago
Mhm.
and being amazed at the number of fruit trees, which was probably then 40. You've now got upwards of 70, 80 trees on the property.
I do. Yep.
It's just insane what you've done, what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, and
And
when you mentioned the word permaculture, permaculture I like to call the art
yeah,
and science of working with nature. How do we
truly.
work in the flow of nature? And we can work with permaculture whether you're running a business, whether you're running a garden, whether you're running
Yeah,
a life, because basically all we do in permaculture is we look to see how we can get in the flow. Call it feng shui, call it permaculture, call it
it's
mother
funny.
nature. And that is what makes most sense to me. I've never been a really religious person. I've gone to church for years, but God as a man sitting somewhere never made sense to me. And for me, it was always this thread that I actually connected with in the early 90s of the energetic flow of the universe. And I like to call it, again, permaculture. How do we get in the flow? And so
Hmm.
my religiosity lives around Mother Nature and the flows of nature and like that. And I had some amazing things happen in 1991. I was 30 years old, and there were 4 life-altering events that happened for me. One of them was I did landmark education, and in their advanced course, they had you create who you are on the planet. So I created myself to be, in 1991, the person on the planet responsible for transforming our global food system.
Perfect.
And I live with that to this day.
Yeah,
Thing number 2 that happened for me that year is I read a book called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn.
I've read that.
It it is a life altering book. I have read all of his stuff, and it basically speaks to how we can work with nature. Thing
Hmm.
number 3 is I took my first permaculture design course in 1991, and for me, it was like, oh my gosh, there's actually something that we can call the way that I think, because that's the way I think, is this whole notion of working in the flow.
Hmm.
And the pivotal piece for me in 1991 was a friend of mine was on a sailboat trip in the South Pacific, and they stopped at an island looking for a grocery store, and the people just looked at him and said, uh, go pick your own. It's like, all right, because that's Quinn's message too.
Hmm.
Once we
From
locked
Ishmael.
up the
Yeah.
food, yeah, once we locked up the food, as Quinn talks about it, once we locked up the food, things went south. Because food used to be free.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
actually, when you look at my yard, so we've mentioned my yard. I've been here 30 years. I call it the urban farm. The urban farm is right in the middle of Phoenix. If you stood on my roof, you could see 50 miles of Phoenix in all directions. And what I've done in the past 30 years is I've turned it into a food production forest.
You've turned it into an education center. You've turned it into a nonprofit organization. You're supporting all kinds of other permaculture activities. I
Yes.
took the permaculture design class with you in 2007, you and Don
Oh, nice.
Titmus,
Yeah.
2007.
Uh-huh.
And this is a permaculture garden here. And you're
I
right
love it.
about the flow. And you're right
Yes.
that and I hadn't thought about it before, but it does apply to business. When
Oh,
you get
yeah.
into the flow,
Right.
Lord knows it took me long enough, but we're in the flow now and it's great. And
Yep.
so are you with the
Right. Yeah.
urbanfarm.org. So you are a
Urbanfarm.org.
nonprofit.
No, I am not a nonprofit. I
Okay,
did a nonprofit once. You may
I
remember
know.
that.
I do.
I got
I was on
I
the
got
board.
brutally beat up. It wasn't a happy thing for me. So urbanfarm.org is a for-profit. The community business that I set up with Kari Spencer about 5 years ago, it's
Hmm.
still, while it still is a for-profit, it's a community-based business. And I do projects like our networking group and the mesquite bean mill that we bought a couple of years ago,
Oh, you
which
did.
was it was a $14,000 investment.
I remember you
That
used to
is
haul it up from Tucson.
from Tucson. That's right. Yeah.
I
So
was there.
I decided years ago that we needed one here. You know me.
Yeah.
I just randomly decide something and then I go make it happen. And the
Smart
mesquite
aleck.
bean mills are not cheap. They're, 15 grand. So I found a used one down in Arivaca, which is southern
Mm-hmm.
Arizona, and paid $4,000 for it. Went down there with a buddy of mine and we picked it up. I bought it sight unseen. And when we got it up here and looking at it, it was disgusting. It was well used. And so we looked at to see what it would take to get it refurbed, and we ended up spending an extra 7 grand on refurbishing it.
Mm-hmm.
But a mesquite bean mill, it sits on a trailer. It's this machine. It's like a chipper mulcher, but it's for pulverizing hard beans. So carob, we put corn through it, to clean it out.
Yeah.
And but what we do is we run it as it's in our cool tool shed with Grow PHX, and we do public milling. So you can bring your mesquite beans down, and we'll mill them for you for, I think, $7 a pound or something like that.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah,
That's
so
not bad at all. Because
not
you
at
can't
all,
even get
not at
that
all.
anywhere else. That you can get it anywhere is fantastic. And
Right.
I know I've had mesquite cookies.
Oh
I've
yes.
had mesquite bread.
Yep.
Man, you're onto something. It's far more nutritious than flour.
Oh yeah. Big
Yeah.
time.
Good
So
move.
yeah, so while it isn't a nonprofit, it's more of a collaborative business. Janice is
Yeah.
basically in charge of it. In fact, Janice this year got a fellowship through Arizona State University for the KER program, the CARE program there. And it's a year-long education training program that we're running Grow PHX through it, because our intent is to transform food in Phoenix. Between now and when I die, I'm 59 years old. Between now and when I die, I intend to create Phoenix into a food secure place, which means that we are growing enough food in Phoenix to feed Phoenix. We can do this. We have the land, we
Any
have the technology, we have the knowledge.
any city can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I notice you have a class called the Permaculture City, which I'm going to take. Those classes, incidentally, are ingenious.
Thank you.
They're online. They're like an hour and a half a hit. They range from 4 to 7 classes for $97.
Mm-hmm.
Given the cost of tuition in a college these days, it's
Right.
not going to teach us what we need to do to create that. My hat's off
Yeah.
to you. That's brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I've never understood why we plant trees for shade. Why can't they also produce food or nuts or something? And they plant them, and when they get to be a certain size, they cut them down.
Right.
I mean, what's going on with that?
Yeah.
You
Yeah, I'm
think you
working
can
on.
change it?
Oh yeah, I know we
All
can.
right.
And
All right.
here's the thing. When I say my goal is that we transform food in Phoenix, and I'm the person on the planet responsible for, I'm not doing all the work. I need you all out there to jump in and grab onto something. I'm getting chills here because I'm preaching. Grab onto something that excites you around where your food comes from. The most important thing that we can be doing right now is figuring out where our food comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been perfectly pointed at over the past 3 months with this whole COVID thing. We have to figure out our food system, a healthy local food system. I can't do it alone. So when I say these are my goals, but I need you all. We all need to be working on it together.
Are you working with schools, little kids? Is anybody developing that part of your outreach?
Not yet.
Because here's the thing. I did that on the Gila River Indian community with the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And those little kids had no idea where their food came from. And they would go to what passed as a store and got nothing but sugar, salt, and fat.
Yep.
And I did it for 3-4 years. And it was heartbreaking. They hadn't seen a flower. So we started with the children. And, a colleague of mine still out there is teaching the kids, got a greenhouse going and all that. So,
nice.
God,
In time.
We're so disconnected from our food. You're so right.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I know. If a child raises a broccoli plant, whether they like broccoli or not, if they raise it, they're gonna eat it.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most days the problem I have is that there needs to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of me, because I have so many ideas
Yeah.
on what needs to happen.
Well, that's
I
why I
just
love the effectiveness of your website, urbanfarm.org, and all the classes that you can take there, all the podcasts, all the blogs. There's a ton of information, and I'm seeing more and more people accessing it and saying, "Oh my God, thank you. We didn't know where to go." So you've been doing the Urban Farm since what, 2001?
well,
You
I
established, you've been doing it all your life. No, I know that.
right.
You've
Yeah,
been doing it all your
I
life.
started calling it the urban farm. So remember I said I went back to college?
Yeah.
I hated school when I was a kid, absolutely hated it. In 1981, I went to college. I was at Arizona State University. I was there for 1 semester. I got a .5 grade average. That was 2 D's and an F. And my dad said to me, "Oh, right, you don't want to be in school, do you, Greg?" Because back then I was running the canning business and I was running the fish pond business. And it's like, what else do I need? I mean, I'm contributing, I'm making money. And when I went back to ASU in 1999, one of the magical things that showed up on my radar is I had 127 credit hours that I had accumulated over the years at Phoenix
Just,
College, because anytime I wanted to learn something, I went and learned it. I loved learning. I hated school.
I get it.
So, you know, so
But you get better at it as you get older.
you
You get
do.
so much better at it.
And, over the years, I took a class in 2008. You remember my little mini books?
Yep.
I took an online class. Cost me, I don't know, $350 on how to write a mini book. And we have 5 mini books. In 2013, I spent $1,250 on how to do a podcast with John Lee Dumas. And we launched the podcast, and here we are 4.5 years later, 570 episodes, almost 2 million listens on a podcast, because what I did is I went and I learned what I needed to learn.
Yeah.
And that's really the basis for what urbanfarm.org does, is we teach people online. And with the COVID thing, we had to shift primarily online. I hope that changes one of these days.
I don't know, Greg. I just heard a guy talking, last name Calloway, from New York University or University of New York, talking about the fact that a lot of colleges are going to be dropping out because students don't want to pay that tuition for all these online classes. So the big guns will stay there. The Harvards, the Yales, the ASUs, they'll be there. But he recommended the students, take a gap year and learn what you want to learn, which is just what you said. That's the way it's going. Learn what you need to know, learn what you want to know.
Yeah. I did the podcast. Yeah, exactly. I did the podcast, and I have very specific reasons that I've done the podcast. And one of my reasons is, and it's the Urban Farm podcast. And one of the reasons is to show to people that you don't have to be miserable in a job. I've interviewed over 550 people that are doing what they love to do. And most of them are making something to get by. Some of them are getting rich, some of them are getting famous, but they're making things work. And that's one of the big reasons. Another big reason I do my podcast is, and one of my questions, I have 5 key questions that I ask people in the second half of the podcast. I ask them, tell me about a failure and what you learned from it. Because that's where we learn the most, is when we make a mistake. Listen, I've had over 30 businesses in my life. I've had some spectacular failures. In 2003, I started a business called Urban Farm Nursery, which I still do, but it's different now. And we decided, Christian, you remember Christian?
Yep.
Christian and I decided to start raising organic plant starts, 4-inch potted plant starts in paper pots. And we raised 80,000. We started with the first year with 80,000 plants with little seeds. and went to potted plants. And that was in the fall of 2003. And the weather in January of 2004 was spectacular outside here in Phoenix, but our plants were only this tall, so we really couldn't sell them. In February and March, it rained every weekend.
Oh.
So people weren't buying plants because they didn't want to be out in the rain. So at the end of my season, which was about mid-March, I had 45,000 plants in pots on my roof of the house, in the backyard, in a greenhouse that we couldn't do anything with. So I don't know if you remember this. I put out an email to everybody and I said, hey guys, I can't do anything with these. Come and get them for free. Make a donation if you want.
Yeah, get them out of here so I can do something else.
Exactly. So, you know, for me, that right there is the basis that I asked that question, because here's what I learned. I learned that, number one, I don't want to be raising plant starts. It's not a big enough game for me. And that then the other thing is I needed to start small. You know, we should have started with 8,000 plants, not 80,000 plants. 8,000 plants, we would have been just fine, and we would have started. So start small, learn from your mistakes.
Well, I've certainly followed that path. We started
Right?
super
Yeah.
small, and now it's like, and I wanted to talk to you about this, the the pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis
Mm-hmm.
has been very interesting for us, and it has been for other businesses. And as I was listening to one of your podcasts, I realized it's got to be interesting for you, because people are really taking an interest in the food chain and what's going on, how to take, because I mean, what if the infrastructure crumbles? What if it's a scary world out there right now? And providing your
Which it
own
did
food,
to a certain extent.
I would think you'd be perfectly situated to
Oh, yeah.
come out of this
I have said,
wailing.
yep. I
Yeah.
have said for years that I have an okay business when times are okay. I have a screaming business when times are down.
Yeah.
In you know, when the stock market tanked in 08, 09, whenever that was, you know, I give twice a year, I talk at Changing Hands.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I give one of my lectures at Changing Hands, and it was August of 2008, 9, whenever the market crashed. And I was speaking at Changing Hands, and I normally get 25 or 30 people show up to an event like that. The week that the stock market was crashing, we lost count at 267 people that physically showed up in Tempe to take my class, Jumpstart Your Fall Garden.
Wow, that's encouraging.
Yeah. So, you know, when this whole COVID thing happened, we were getting ready to do our edible backyard summit.
Yeah,
which was like the second week of March.
Right.
And I said to my team, which is Taylor and Janice and Renee and Ken and Raymond, I said, you know, what can we do here?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a lot of classes that we've offered over the past 5 years that are recorded. And, you know, we have some that are new. And so we decided that we would offer a class a day. So we started I think it was March 15th.
I remember that.
Yeah, we started March 15th, 2020. We started giving a class a day, 7 days a week. That lasted for 2 weeks. That was a lot of work.
Yeah.
And
yeah, if you didn't have it pre-recorded, it sure was.
Right. Well, and just organizing it and the whole 9 yards. So, you know, we gave 14 days worth of classes right in a row, and it's like, okay, time out. I need a break. So then we went to 5 classes a week and did that for about 6 or 7 weeks. Now we're doing 2 classes a week. And these are opportunities for people to connect with the community and learn gardening.
I really
skills.
like that. 5 to 6 o'clock, perfect time too.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. And that's Pacific time.
Yeah.
And, you know, Don Titmus has given a couple of classes. He gave one on humanure and solar ovens, and we've given compact, right? We give composting classes, gardening classes. Here's the thing. When we started this, my email list was about 30,000 people. It's almost double that now.
Yeah.
In 3 months. So there's been a tidal wave of people wanting to know how to grow their own food.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad you're addressing it. My final
Mhm.
sort of topic for the day that I really wanted to touch on. And I wanted to talk to you about this for a while, so I corralled you to do this so I can.
All
Climate
right.
change. Climate
Oh,
change.
yes.
What I'm noticing, and I'm sitting outside now, the first week of June, it is really, really hot and muggy. This is
Mm-hmm.
not the way it was when all the time to plant
Mm-mm.
charts were made. So what are you supposing? What are you thinking? Because I'm seeing now that we have this kind of heat for 8 months a year.
Yeah.
8 months a year. We don't have the water to support it.
Mm-mm.
I've got fruit trees now. I'm a crazy lady. I've got fruit trees now, and I missed a flood cycle. The guy just so I've been hauling hoses all over the place.
Yep.
Climate change is really going to impact us here. Are you doing any sort of thinking, planning, writing? Because I know you write. You write for
Mm-hmm.
Edible Phoenix, and you're writing for another magazine.
Oh, yeah. I regularly do local
Yeah,
magazines, and
yeah.
yeah.
What are you
Um,
thinking? What are you telling people? What are you suggesting they do? Do I turn this into an entire desert garden? So I've got 5 types of garden here.
nice. Well, so let's just address climate change for
Yeah,
starters.
let's address
Um,
it.
Unfortunately, I know what's coming.
Yeah,
And the only reason I know what's coming is because I know how nature works. In nature, there is something called carrying capacity. It is a capacity of an ecosystem to manage the amount of biological waste that is in it.
yeah.
If you have a fish pond, and the carrying capacity of the fish pond is 100 fish, 1,000 snails, and 10,000 algae, and that's its natural balance of the fish pond, um, then you start adding more food to it to make more fish. They make more poop. It pollutes the system more. And before long, what you've gotten is a system that can no longer support itself
Mm-hmm.
unless we put filters on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned all about this. 2 of the classes that I took at Phoenix College during the time that I was a flunky from ASU was on wastewater management.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can filter the pond to a certain extent, but we've gotten to a point on our planet, we've exceeded the carrying capacity of the planet. There's too many people here,
Yeah.
and nobody's talking about that. And really, that's
Paul
what we should
Ehrlich
be
was
talking
talking about that 25, 30, no, God, 40 years ago, he was talking
about.
about it.
Yep,
And nobody wanted to hear about it. You tie that with some other political issue, you'd understand that, but that's still the problem.
still people don't want to hear about
Right.
it. We're still
And they
not
don't
talking
want,
about too many
they don't want
people.
to take care of their resources. But what do
Right,
we do with this heat that's going to be worse and worse and
worse
worse?
and worse. Well, we
Uh,
have to learn how to manage and harvest rainwater and water.
so
In
you're
fact,
doing
we
that. You're
just
teaching people.
yeah. In fact, we just this week designed a 7-module water harvesting course that we'll be giving in July.
Great.
Don Titmus and I are going to be doing that.
Okay.
Um, a big piece of it is educating. The other piece is that nature is going to do whatever nature does,
Yeah.
and there's not much we can do about that.
Nope. Well,
And
we're doing a heck of a lot now in terms of being agents of climate change. So we
oh yeah,
are,
well,
there's
right, but
that.
there's to go the other direction, of lessening the impact. My biggest concern, and I went back to college late, and I have a
Mhm.
master's in urban and environmental planning, so I've done a fair amount of studying about our impact on the planet, and
Mhm.
I think we've shot past what we can actually do something about. So what I
Got it.
spend my time doing, because honestly, when I go down that path, I become ineffective.
Mhm.
It makes me crazy. I get depressed. There's nothing I can do about it. So all I can do right now is what I can do right now.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is, while I have a sense because I know how natural systems works about where we're going. The truth of the matter is we really don't know where we're going. We don't know what it's going to be like in 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years. I can surmise what it means. And when I go there and surmise it, it makes me unhappy and depressed.
Yeah.
So to be most effective, I have to stay present to what's true right now. And what is true right now is that we have millions of people that are interested in growing their own food and how to do it. And you're right, we're getting hotter here. It's more humid in June than I ever remember it being. Because
I'm sitting outside today. This is just muggy. This is
right.
downright muggy.
Our evaporative cooler usually works through the end of June. I think we're going to have to turn it off here pretty soon because things are changing.
Yeah.
So really all we can do about climate change is what we can do. And for me, what I can do is I can teach people what they can do differently about growing their own food and transforming their landscapes into food.
Yeah.
Everything here is a third of an acre at the urban farm. It's 80 feet wide, 160 feet deep. Everything here is edible or it supports edible. So I don't throw things away. Things go into building this space as an edible paradise. And I've started to transform a few things to desert. So, you know, with the mesquite bean mill, I've got a couple of mesquites on the property. And so, you know, I don't know if I answered your question
you know,
exactly,
it's
but
what I think. Keep that message coming out. It's my mantra is Arthur Ashe's, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. More than that, there is nothing more than that.
What else can we do?
You know, that's all you can do. What you can do, and help other people learn how to do what they can do, because it's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
So that's the perfect note to sort of end it on. I wanted to have that sort of close our conversation, but I do have one final question.
All right.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you want to have dinner with, Greg?
Daniel Quinn.
Oh,
wrote
you
a book
would?
called, absolutely, no question about it. I'm getting chills right now thinking
That's
about
Ishmael, right?
Yep, he wrote Ishmael, Story of B, My Ishmael. I was so excited a couple of years ago when Janice connected with him and we were going to get him on our podcast. And he put us off for 6 months because he says, I'm writing a new book. I want to bring out the new book. And in that time, he passed away.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I did get to see him.
But you reached out. You reached out and contact was made. Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
hey.
And I did get to meet him when he was speaking at Changing Hands in Tempe. I wouldn't have missed that for the world. But Daniel Quinn, no doubt.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us.
Oh
and
my
know
gosh,
that 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be listening to what you're doing twice a week, because I think it's phenomenal. And there's a couple of classes I'm going to take because I think you're brilliant. And I thank you. Thank you for being, Greg. Thank you for being.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, everybody. You've just had the very best of Greg Peterson. And with a little luck, we'll have him back again in another season to talk about perhaps other things. And I would really encourage you, if there's something you want to learn about, if there's someone you want me to talk to, please let me know. We're going to have all of Greg's contact information up and available for you when this podcast is up. And check it out, because it's just a wealth of things you can do for the planet and for yourself. Thank you. Take care of yourself. Wash your hands. Stay home if you can, and wear your mask. Thank you. See you soon.